Greetings. Welcome to another Wild Medicine podcast. This is your host, Earthly, and I am so excited to be back in front of my microphone doing another episode for you guys. It feels really, really good and natural, so blessings to that. If you're new to the Wild Medicine podcast, this is a space where we safely talk about all things holistic and healing. We're not so much looking at the conventional way of doing things, but we're looking back to the more ancient and medicinal and natural practices of our world to reach true wellness. And if you're interested in anything from crystals to herbal healing to motherhood to hippie dippy stuff, this is your place, because that's all that we talk about. We're trying to get to our core and step deeper into our hearts, and so this episode is going to be exactly that. And if you're a mama out there or a mama to be, this episode is 100% for you. This time around, I have a beautiful woman coming back on the show. Her name is Inga. You may have heard her episode from a previous, I forget what episode she was in, maybe episode 8. But she's amazing, and we talked about yoga in that episode. But this time, I'm bringing her back for actually a 3-part series all about motherhood and taking care of yourself and self-care. This woman is, wow, she is, I think a word that I could correlate to this beautiful human is she is magnanimous. Everything that she does just pulls you straight in, and you just want to be a part of it. When you're standing in a room with her, you literally cannot help but to just want to speak with her. There's just a level of authenticity that just radiates outward, and I love sharing her with you guys. And I love the people that she brings into my life, so I'm hoping to bring some more beautiful people into her life as well through this. So, like I said, today we are going to be speaking about motherhood. And this episode is going to focus on postpartum depression, and we're going to share some resources for new mothers as well as mothers who aren't new, just in ways that they can help, as well as just spread some more awareness to people who could be expecting, or people like me who don't have any children but someday do want to have children and want to be aware of this topic and, you know, all the ups and downs and beautiful parts of having children, and, you know, being somebody that births the new generation, and how we can help ourselves through that process, because I feel like there's this huge perspective that it's something easy and very natural and organic, and although that may be true in some cases, it's a very hardcore process. Almost every single mother that you talk to will share that, no, it is not always easy and lackadaisical, really chill. No, it's a real thing to have children, to bear children, and to know how to raise them, and especially in a modern day age, you know, the truth is still there when, you know, we share that it takes a village to raise children. But in today's modern world, it's very difficult to do that because many, many, many things have changed. So we're trying to rebuild that, and that's something that we see we need to work on. And so in that special, honorable way, we are bringing forth this podcast. So without further ado, I would like to invite Miss Inga on.
Hi. Hi.
Inga, the yoga goddess.
How's everybody doing? I hope that everyone is having an amazing year as we continue into 2019. I'm really excited about this podcast, though, because there's just been so much of this popping up into my life through my friends and just other women that I'm connected with online. So I'm super excited.
Mm-hmm. This is something you have a lot of experience with. Do you want to share with people a little bit about, you know, who you are as a person and a little bit about your babies?
So I actually have 2 children. They are 15 and 9, both girls, Lilith and Jamie. I had Lilith very young, and even though I grew up in a family of 6, you never really know the firsthand struggles of motherhood, especially since no one really tells you. They don't really come with a manual. So like, you have the child and you're always scared to death, and then you deal with each experience as it comes, and that's really all you can do. So I was I was 21 when I had Lilith, so very inexperienced, and I was in an abusive relationship when I got pregnant with her. So the abuse really didn't start until we found out I was pregnant, and I think that was partially because he saw this as maybe a stealing of his youth or his freedom or whatever. I mean, I know that men actually suffer from postpartum too, so that's totally a thing. But kind of the way it was conveyed in my situation was I was the bad guy somehow. So physical abuse, mental abuse, and really abuse on himself occurred during the pregnancy. So once Lilith came into the world, things got quite a bit harder. There were, on his part, some substance abuse issues. So coming back, I don't want to circle forward too much. Coming back to when I was pregnant, I talked about being depressed. I actually had chronic depression before I got pregnant. So I said something to my child's father about being depressed, and it was kind of like a get over it type of thing. I feel like his culture, or maybe just his family specifically, didn't really believe in the truth of mental illness. So you being depressed just was not a big deal. It wasn't a thing. It was, you need to be stronger and just get over it because you're a woman. So everyone's raised differently. You can't change that. So I went to my doctor, who, unfortunately, since I didn't know how to get a doctor on my own, I was going to his family's doctor. So his sister's gynecologist that also, birthed babies. So I noticed when I look back on it that there was really not a whole lot of concern for my well-being. It was more about keeping the baby alive. So I was written a prescription. There wasn't really any conversation about it. So I didn't feel like anyone really cared about what happened to me.
Mm-hmm.
So,
which can be very, very difficult as a new mother.
It's common.
It's very common. And, I feel like that's something that we really, really need to shift, is that also still carrying that focus on the well-being of the mother, especially after, she just birthed a whole new being into this world.
Yeah.
Because the mother's health is the baby's health.
Right. And at this point in time, and I mean, this was 2003, so there wasn't as much medication for depression for pregnant women. So I was prescribed Paxil, which, if you know the history of Paxil, that was not a good decision for a pregnant woman to take Paxil. So this made things worse, and as things started to climax, as I continued to get sick and gain weight, the suicidal thoughts continued, and I actually tried to commit suicide at one point. Clearly, I wasn't successful, but I just ended up getting really, really sick. But this is also common in pregnancy when you have a lot of hormonal, ups and downs. So once I had Lilith, more problems ensued, and my postpartum depression set in. So definitely was depressed during the pregnancy. You have those moments where you have the baby and things are okay, but then the postpartum sets in.
Usually when does that start happening?
Probably right after typically when you get home from the hospital. Because you're at the hospital, everything's exciting. They're taking pictures. They're making you fill out the names and the birth certificates and all of this. And you're dealing with all of that hustle and bustle. And you're actually resting because it's only a couple days, really, of excitement. And then if the baby's healthy and you're healthy, you go home after 2 to 4 days. Some people are able to stay an entire week if they want to, or if they're sick. If something is happening or there were complications, then you would stay longer. But typically when you get home and you start doing the work of taking care of
the newborn,
the little baby, that's when things start to set in. And so we were actually discussing, before I get too into it and start talking about Jamie, we were discussing the definition of postpartum.
Yes. So what is postpartum?
So postpartum is defined, and this is actually a really perfect description. Depression suffered by a mother following childbirth, typically arising from the combination of hormonal changes, psychological adjustment to motherhood, and fatigue. So definitely.
And I love that. I think it's so easy for people to think of one reason why something is happening, but usually our overwhelm comes alive from having so many different imbalances or areas of our life that need more attention. And so with being a new mother, I mean, everything changes.
Absolutely.
And so not only are you having crazy hormonal shifts, but also, you know, just the tasks of taking care of a newborn child. Having to learn how to do that, not being able to sleep and still function. But then also, I'm sure there's fear and anxiety of, am I taking care of this child right?
Yeah,
like, who
absolutely.
do I listen to? You know, I can only imagine all of the emotions that come with it.
There's definitely a lot.
So I feel like this definition is really good.
It's a perfect description, really.
Yeah.
So when the postpartum set in the first time, I really, because of the abuse ensuing and continuing after I had the baby, I didn't really know what to do or say. I had two friends I was allowed to be around. One of them was a childhood friend who was married, and another one that I met at a job that was around quite a bit. So I had two friends I was allowed to see. I wasn't allowed to have access to a phone. So we had to go somewhere to use a phone. So it was very challenging because in 2003, yes, we had computers, but everyone didn't really have computers. Mm-hmm. So, like, I didn't have, like, an online, like, community to go to. So I didn't really know what to do, and my doctor told me I had a nervous breakdown, and then I was able to finally get to a place that was safe, and the postpartum kind of continued after that. Like, Lilith was almost 1 at that point, and it was still continuing because I had never had a chance to really recover and catch up from everything that was happening. Yeah. So then years later, about 5.5 years later, when I got pregnant with Jamie.
Wow, that really, that really, you know, I'm not a mom.
Right.
You know, and I feel like this is definitely a conversation that's new to me. And to think about also, I feel like in the modern context, postpartum something that's like, happens right after the baby and maybe a couple months after. But the fact that, you know, this oftentimes can be the beginning of even a lifelong depression and, you know, if you don't get help. If you don't get help, a lot of people don't have the resources to get help.
Right.
So, sorry to interrupt.
No, it's fine, but no.
But that just really amazed me. To put that in context, like even she was a year old and you're still struggling because you never had the chance to catch up.
Yeah, I didn't even know what I was recovering from.
Yeah.
And just moving forward. So the combination of the violent relationship and then, you know, not having the nice environment or good environment and then trying to, like, not get depressed. Like, trying to step out of it and not having resources. So it did continue for a while. And then 5.5 years later, whenever I got pregnant with Jamie, at first...
Did you stay with him for 5 years? Or?
No. No, I left, like, when Lilith was 8 months. Okay. I was able to finally get out of it. Okay.
Beautiful.
And luckily, you know, he's a great father.
Yeah.
But I was in a different relationship. Like 5.5 years later, I got pregnant with Jamie, and things went south really fast. And in this case, it was very different. Even though the relationship was verbally abusive and rarely, but sometimes physically abusive during the pregnancy and the little while I was around after, a lot of the violence he did to himself. So there was substance abuse I didn't know about that he was doing. There were other things happening in my that I had no idea about. And then when I was about 4.5 months pregnant and Lilith was 5.5, we were eating dinner one night and he just exploded. And I didn't really everything happened very, very quickly. There was an argument that I can't even remember what it started over. Very small. And he ended up, I can't even remember because it was so fast, but he ended up, like, cutting himself open, like, trying to slice his chest open. So, like, whereas I was still depressed and I was already considered a high risk because of the things that happened with Lilith, he got super violent toward himself. He had to be committed. by the Marines, because he's a veteran. And he had to have 16 stitches in each wrist. And I couldn't be around him for a very long time. And it was just so, like,
wow.
On my mind, I was like, did I do something? Do I do something to these men to make them act crazy when I get pregnant? Like, is there something wrong with me? Am I sending that out? Like, what is happening? Because for it to happen again in a different way, I kind of took a lot of blame.
Yeah.
And then, you know, I was really worried. And at one point, he did start to get better. So we tried to, like, make things work as parents. And this was when I had to realize the lesson that you cannot stay with someone just for the sake of your children. Now, every situation is different, but this lesson is really hard to learn. Like, I was, you know, society puts this stigma on what your family should look like, even though everyone's family looks so different. The stigma sometimes, and the stigma in my mind at that point in time, I was like, I had already had my heart attack. I was 27 when I had Jamie, maybe 28. And I thought that if I could make this work, you know, I should stay together so that I'm with one of my children's father. And I'm not looked down upon.
Like, as mothers, like, that's also something that, you know, what society says is, you know, if you're a single mother, I mean, it's fucking hard.
Yeah.
Not only that, but, like, there's that society notion of, like, oh, why isn't the kid's father around or whatever?
Right.
You know, but
and there's a lot of blame placed on you.
Yeah, there's a lot of blame placed on the mother. And especially, like, you know, taking that blame onto yourself, too.
Right.
It's a heavy burden to carry.
For sure. So, once I realized that lesson, a lot of the postpartum had already set in. Jamie was about, I think when I was finally able to leave again, Jamie was almost 1. So around the same age. So,
Damn.
yeah. So Jamie, whenever this happened, I had already lost all my breast milk. So my mom told me, and I mean, this is her because she's obsessed with breastfeeding. She said that you have to have a good environment, you have to have a good diet, and you have to have a good outlook in order to breastfeed. So I didn't have a good environment. I had a horrible outlook. And then I didn't have just kind of the mental capacity at all. Like, I was using supplements. So, like, there's different supplements that you can use. These at that point in time, that was 2009.
Yeah.
There were different supplements you could use to produce breast milk. They weren't favorable to societal acceptance because you would, like, smell like syrup. Fenugreek was something that I used that you could buy at, like, Whole Foods. A fenugreek tea, and then you could take pills. So I would do that to try to keep producing breast milk. By the time Lilith was like Jamie. By the time Jamie was like 4 months old, I had to stop. All my milk had dried up. We were in a situation where he had quit his job because he thought I was cheating, because he was doing whatever he was doing. That's his own mindset. So I had 4 jobs. And 2 of those jobs I could take Jamie, and then 1 I could not. So, like, there was just a lot. So it all dried up, and I cried probably for 3 days.
Yeah, what was that like to have, like, your milk dry up?
Because that connection is gone. Like, that connection is super deep. There's nothing else like it. Animals feel that connection with their babies all the time. With us as humans, like, it's literally a not only psychological connection for the baby, but it's a very deep emotional connection for the mother. So I was devastated, and I cried for days.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I feel like that's something that's also not really talked about, is, like, you know, how the action and the everything that comes with on both sides for the baby and the mother.
Yeah.
You know, when you quit breastfeeding, especially when it's out of your control.
Absolutely. And there's so many other complications, but, like, this one I felt like was preventable because of those 3 things: environment, your mental capacity, and your diet. So there was just a lot of factors that should have been there that weren't, and it made things much, much harder. So after I moved, this time whenever I moved away from Jamie's father, I had a whole house of women because we lived in like a 5-bedroom, 2.5-bath house, and there were like 2 couples that lived in their rooms, and then we had our own areas to live in. Like I had a room, and then my kids had a room. So we had all these women around all the time. So it was easier to like move past the postpartum. But honestly, I feel like from Jamie to probably about 5 years ago. So from Jamie being like 1 to Jamie being like 5, I still stayed very, very depressed. I don't know that I would categorize it as postpartum because, eventually by the time she was 1, I don't know. I mean, it doesn't really matter, but I don't know if a doctor would characterize it as such because it continued for so long. But you were still
depressed.
Right. I stayed that way.
You were still a struggling mother with mental illness.
So, yeah. So, I wanted to share my story mostly because there were so many women that I've talked to about it. I recently talked to a first-time mother friend of mine, and I've heard so many times that my family told me to get over it, or it's not that big of a deal, or aren't you like absolutely thrilled and happy you just had a baby? That's not always how it goes down.
And I feel like especially for young mothers, it's like there's not a lot of support to authentically express like, hey, this is what I'm struggling with, like, and to even talk about your mental state is hard in general, even if you're not having a newborn baby or family.
Absolutely.
It's so hard to talk about, especially for a new mother, because there is that expectations of, oh, shouldn't you just be happy? Or,
exactly.
Even in there's also, you can still get postpartum even if you have like, your family helping you, your relationship with the father is good.
Absolutely.
There weren't any complications. You can still get postpartum because of the, a few things could be out of balance and it could just happen. The hormones. And it's just intense. It's a huge shift. Like, there's so many ways and reasons and variables that could make it happen.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
And kind of the way what you said was actually, it's so funny that you don't have kids because that's exactly right. Mm-hmm. Like, things could seem perfect from the outside. You could have a perfectly sweet husband who takes care of you hand and foot, or that's able to be there with you, or you could have, your mom or your mother-in-law with you all the time, able to help, you able to sleep, and it still happens. Mm-hmm. Which almost creates a whole different stigma. Yeah, because then it makes
you feel guilty, too. No matter what, you're stuck feeling guilty.
Exactly.
A mother, like, I can imagine, like, we would put these expectations on ourselves to, be happy about our child and about our life and what we're, being, especially, wanting to be grateful for everything that
Absolutely.
you have. And when you're depressed, no matter what you're depressed over or what's causing you to experience this deep sadness, a lot of times it's like, well, I see, like, things are great in my life, but, like, why...
Like, what's wrong with me?
What's wrong with me? And I experience that just as somebody who, is still healing from chronic depression and still, I think that's something that is a part of the human experience for a reason.
Right.
And some people feel it deeper than others, and especially women,
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. So kind of the reason why I wanted to talk about it is because one of the things I feel like we can do to help future mothers and to help each other is to normalize the conversation. So there's so many conversations that need to be normalized. This is definitely one of them. I feel like I still to this day this is the first time I've ever really like openly shared what happened to me. Yeah. I don't really.
Thank you for sharing.
You're welcome. I don't really talk about it. And like my mom doesn't even know really what happened. So it's just been showing up in my life so much. One of my friends was on Instagram and just kind of talking about not even postpartum, but just like how it's so hard to continue forward. And I don't want to go on a tangent because we are going to do 2 more episodes, but just that popped up into my life about it taking a village. And it being harder in this modern day and age to have that village, because your mom and
we
dad.
were talking about it at my last ceremony too.
Yeah,
like that was
your mom and dad are working full time. They're entrepreneurs.
Yeah,
grandparents are these days. So it's not like before when grandparents stayed home with their grandchildren and helped and took care of them. And my mom does sometimes, but like she is definitely an entrepreneur. Like she is out there getting it. So they're not always there. And then child care, even if you do, end up going to child care, Jamie's almost 10 years old. It's still $400 a month.
Yeah.
That's like...
And then it's like somebody else watching your kid.
Exactly.
You don't know what's going on. You're probably feeling anxious about it.
Right. So there's another stigma. So like we have these babies and we just want to love and take care of them. But sometimes when our emotions go off the rails and we don't have that support, it makes it harder. So really normalizing the conversation, being willing to be vulnerable in the way where if you have even an associate, any friend that you need to talk to someone about something that you're experiencing as a new mother, there are groups out there. Luckily, we have online.
Yeah, thank God we have social media. One of the biggest blessings about it.
It's so interesting because people look at social media as such a bad thing, and there's so many good things about it.
Oh my gosh, especially if you're using it as the tool that it is. Like, my life would be completely different without social media. Like, my spiritual journey really was sparked through it, and I've met so many communities and people through it.
You've created communities.
I created a huge online community. And,
Absolutely.
And, that's one thing with my sister-in-law, that's really helped when she was, like, asking a lot of questions, because when you have a mom, like, when you're a new mom, you have questions, and, that's the only thing I can really tell her is, dude, like, there's got to be online Facebook communities. There has to be spaces where mothers are talking about these things.
Absolutely.
Sometimes you can't talk about certain things with your family because everybody has their own opinions.
Especially if they already have their perceptions of you that gets in the way of them being able to openly help you.
Yeah. That's real.
Yeah. Like, if they have a perception of you, or if they're looking at you with the stigma of self-reflection and they see something in you that bothers them or triggers them, it's going to affect their ability to help you. So, I know that, like I said, people look at Facebook and Instagram as like, but I've had so many people reach out to me and talk to me about different things.
Yeah,
even just not about this, but in general, like, and it's just really important that we create a world where we can talk about this
in person, not just online.
Yeah, but
online,
in person and online.
I'm happy we have it online
for sure.
And it's gaining more online and more momentum, and there are groups, but we need to be able to talk about this in person.
Absolutely.
This needs to be normalized.
Absolutely. So that's kind of the reason why I wanted to come forth. I'm super grateful to you for having this platform. But it just makes me really sad when I talk to women and they're being told to get over it and they don't know what to do. And this is how, like, bad things happen.
And they're not being listened to. I remember you sharing a story with me where, you went to the doctor to ask for help and let them know what you're going through, but they just wrote you a prescription. There wasn't any talking about it.
There wasn't a conversation at all.
There was no conversation about, okay, what's actually going on? What are you actually feeling? Like,
absolutely.
And there's a lot of times, like, we need people to ask us these questions so that we can actually have space to think about them. Okay, what is actually making me sad deep down, or what are the little actions that are stressing me out?
Exactly.
And I think doctors and anybody that's in a position where people are going to be coming to them like that, they should be ready to ask those questions. Absolutely.
And I'm hopeful. I am happy to say that when I had Jamie, my doctor was way better. She was so great. I still remember her name, Dr. Higginbotham. Craziest name. It's such a Harry Potter. It's a Harry Potter name. Yeah. That's what it reminds me of. But she was amazing, and the way she explained things was so great. It made it so easy for me to understand what was happening to me. And I feel like because I had her, it made things a little easier.
Yeah.
So I didn't end up on depression medication the second time. But
which is probably made a big difference.
Right.
Because, sometimes in some cases, that could help. But there's so much more going down in the roots of everything that you can take a depression medication, but that shit's still going to come up.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
With that.
So that, one thing I want to say is, like, if you're going to a doctor who you're letting them know about your postpartum experience and if you are feeling depressed and you're trying to express that to them and they just want to, like, sign you a prescription and not actually sit down and talk to you about it and help you find holistic things, find a new doctor.
Yeah.
There are many doctors out there, I believe that, are open to that and speaking about that and holding space for you and providing actual, real, substantial ways of healing and helping you.
I feel like a lot of first-time moms don't have the resources that they need in order to continue on the path they want to continue on in a healthy and happy way without hurting themselves or hurting the baby, because that is a possible side effect of postpartum depression. Yeah. If you get too overwhelmed, it could happen. And there's just not a lot. I mean, as new mothers, half of us don't have the money to hire help if we don't have our families, Yeah. But it's very important for you to find. I mean, the first 3 months are just rough as fuck. Like, they are just rough because you are trying to keep yourself taken care of and take care of this baby. I would say, and I wouldn't use the word advice, but this would be my biggest kind of takeaway from my experiences. Tell someone what's happening. I mean, even if it's a friend, if it's a close friend or family member, a cousin, a sister,
somebody on Instagram,
a friend.
Like, people, like, all the time. Like, I tell people all the time, like, if you're struggling with something, even if it is something like postpartum, come to me, talk to me. Like, let's open dialogue to just simply express what we're going through.
What's really cool about, like, even when I talk to you, what's really cool is that you get a different perspective by having an outside conversation about it and someone that's not standing in your reality and you're saying what's happening. It helps that person to have, with fresh eyes and an open heart, to be able to offer you a different perspective. So, and maybe they're kind enough to come over and, sit with your baby so you can take a nap. Which I actually did that a lot when one of my friends had a baby. And she lived in Austin, so I would drive down there. Wow, I think there was a couple times where I was in town and I would just stay with her and, like, hold the baby so she could sleep for an hour or something. Yeah. So, like, just reaching out, because there are friends of yours, most likely, that will be willing to help you.
Yeah, I mean, I try to offer that to, like, even my sisters, For it's
sure.
Like, come on, like, I can help you. But that being said, I feel like it can also be really hard to accept help. And I don't know why that is. But I get that vibe. Yeah, like, why do you think it's hard to...
I'm so freaking stubborn. I'm a Taurus, so I guess that's normal. The bull. Super, 100% Taurus. So I struggle to ask for help in general. It's actually something I'm working on personally as a mother, as a yoga teacher, as a human. I'm just working on being able to open my mouth and voice what I need. It is very hard because you have that guilt of, you almost like immediately say, I need help with this. If not, it's okay. So you're automatically assuming that they won't help you. And by putting that out there, that's what you're welcoming in. So you're not even really welcoming it in if you're like, if not, it's okay. Because that's just you trying to make yourself feel better from the guilt you're holding.
Yeah. It's so funny because that made me think about, I was listening to another podcast today and this guy was stating how one of the things that Yogi Bhajan shared was that, which Yogi Bhajan is the founder and person who brought Kundalini Yoga to the West. He shared that the worst English words ever are yeah, but.
Wow.
Which is so true.
That is so true. Yeah. In the combination.
The
word
those.
But.
Yeah.
But. Automatically. So, actually, I don't remember where I read it, to be honest. It was probably a book about communication. I do a lot of personal development. When you attach the word but to anything, you immediately erase anything you said before that. Yeah. So if you say I love you but, That's like someone's heart lifting. I love you, but, and then their heart drops.
Or I want to do this, but...
Or
but that's
I need help
you
with
can
this.
Help me, but if not, that's okay.
Exactly.
Yeah, like
exactly.
You know,
exactly.
Don't even just try to get that. I'm working on getting that, but and sorry out of my vocabulary.
Oh my gosh,
those are things we just say way too freaking often.
I have been trying to stop saying sorry for 15 years consciously, and it is very difficult. It's very difficult.
Sorry.
Right?
Like, come on.
And all of us do it.
Everybody,
all of us do it. I meet so many people every day that do it. Like, even if they just slightly bump into you, sorry. I'm like,
you're
no
good.
no reason.
Thank you for like touching me a little bit.
But so that's kind of one of the lessons I had to learn is asking for help is extremely difficult. Extremely difficult. It's actually one of the biggest, it's one of the hardest things that my fiance, like, it's one of the one thing about, I can't talk, I'm sorry. It's one of the things, see, there it is. It's one of the things that I struggle with my fiance, that asking for help, trying to accept help, it drives him crazy. It's very difficult for me. He's like, just do it. So, definitely as a first-time mom and just as a mother in general, I struggle to ask for help even with the kids. Like, I have to get to a point where I'm desperate. Yeah. And then I'm reaching out and I'm like, oh, someone please help me. So I would say some of the resources I want to give is, for sure, talk to your parents, talk to your sister, talk to your cousin, talk to your friend. And just say what you're feeling.
Your heart and just, it's okay.
Because in this day and age, a lot of us are a lot more open-minded. And if we're able to be more vulnerable, it is helpful to everyone. Whenever you step into the light, you let everybody else know that they can too. Yeah. And that they're not alone.
People want to help you. You know, like, especially when you just had a baby. Like, people want to be around you. People want to help you. People want to be there for you. And, you know, you just have to open yourself up to receive that help and ask for that help. Because, absolutely. You know, we can't read each other's minds.
Exactly.
You know, especially if you know, everybody has their own life. And it's a day and age where, you know, people are entrepreneurs. People are usually smothered in their work no matter what they're doing. Even if they're working for a corporation or they have their own life, you know, it's harder for people to be able to know exactly when each other need help.
Absolutely.
So it's our job as individuals that when we need help, we need to voice it and ask for help, no matter what it is. And somebody will be there to help us. When we are genuinely calling out into the universe and calling out into our lives, into our families, into the people around us saying, I need help, well, we're in each other's lives to help each other. Absolutely. No matter what. By divine timing, by everything, we're in each other's lives to help each other.
Exactly. So, talk to someone. Ask someone for help. That's my biggest takeaway. Another takeaway is not putting all the blame on yourself if you're not doing everything perfectly. Especially if it's your first time. You gotta let that shit go.
Yeah, I really want to talk about first time mothers.
So when I feel
like it's different.
Yeah.
You know?
When I had Lilith, it was the scariest thing in the world. She was super early, she was huge. I had 5 brothers and sisters, so I knew what to physically do to take care of a baby. Mm-hmm. However, I didn't know what to do about my own mental state. Mm-hmm. I didn't get to a point where I wanted to hurt either of my children, thank God. But that point does come if you don't get help. Mm-hmm. And I feel like I just tried to just really take things in stride. I did not take care of myself, though. I didn't. I wasn't into holistic health yet. This was when I got out of the military when I was 19, and I was 21. So, like, I just had her right at the 21, like, yeah, the year I turned 21 is when I had her.
So you got pregnant when you were 20, so you probably got pregnant shortly after you came out of the military.
Right, exactly. So I still had a very warped mindset. It wasn't really positive at all, and I allowed someone to control most of my life during that time. So it was very, very difficult not only to ask for help, but to know that I was worthy of the help. So self-care, and I know that a lot of people think that self-care is like hot baths and going to the nail shop and all that. And that's not what it is. It's taking care of your mental health. It's being aware of where you are mentally and actually doing something about it if it's not serving you.
And being devotional about making sure that your wellness is there and taken care of.
And that is so not where I was when I had Lilith.
It's hard.
Like, first time mom, absolutely not. Like, and if you even try to do something for yourself, you drowned yourself in guilt. So, second takeaway, let go of that guilt shit. Let it go, because you are worthy of help. Because if you're not around to take care of that baby, who's going to take care of that baby? You got to take care of you too. That's
and you got to make sure that if you want your baby to be as healthy and happy and holy that they deserve it, and you know that they deserve, then you have to make sure that you are also as happy and holy and healthy as you can possibly be. Because your baby's health is a direct reflection of your own health. And whether that's, you know, their immediate health right there in that moment, or their health 10 years down the road, or 20 years down the road.
Absolutely.
Our experience in our mother's womb, our experience outside of the womb, and especially in the first couple of years, they're huge developmental years.
Absolutely. So that part is super important. You have to take care of you so you can be the you that your baby needs and wants, and that deserves, you know? So that was a huge takeaway as a first-time mother. Like, when I really look back on that time, I am like, wow, that girl wouldn't even know who I am right now. She wouldn't even know who I am right now. And I still fall when it comes to taking care of myself. I still sometimes put everything else first, but then I come home to myself, and I realize that I have to get back to that self-care.
Yeah.
And
you have things in your everyday life, like your mundane everyday life, that keep you to check in with yourself. And
absolutely.
Your wellness. And not just because you're a yoga teacher, because there's stay-at-home moms. You know, whether that means that when you lay your baby down for a nap, and the first thing you go and do instead of getting on your phone or something is just go and journal.
Absolutely.
Go and journal. Do so, even if you can only take 3 minutes when they're first taking a nap before you have to do something else. Write.
Absolutely.
You know, what are some other things you could have advice for first-time mothers, that ways that they can minimally add self-love and checking in with themselves into their life?
Definitely a meditation practice.
Yeah.
So there's tons of free meditations online.
Life changer.
There's tons of free meditations online. So meditation is essential. Meditation has saved me so many times. When I've gotten into that kind of deep, dark depression, whether it's postpartum or not, meditation has pulled me out almost every single time. So
because it gives you mental clarity.
So while you're pregnant, I would say 100% try to develop some sort of meditation practice, even if it's a guided meditation practice, even if it's you're just
repeating
sitting
one word, or breathing, or just staring at a freaking blade of grass,
or a candle,
just letting your mind relax.
Absolutely. So
and you have to train yourself. It's not something that you do one time and it's like, oh, okay, I know how to meditate. It's like, you got to train yourself.
Absolutely.
You know?
So I would definitely say, while you're pregnant, try to develop a meditation practice, hardcore. And then another thing I would say is, once you're cleared, find a way to move your body. Even if you do videos at home, move your body in some way. And of course, my mind says, do some yoga, because yoga is amazing for you. But you could 100% do something else.
You can dance, you can go on a walk, you can
walking is so good for your brain.
Anything. I love walking.
Walking is so good for your brain. Just move your body in some sort of way, because that's going to help your mental clarity. Walks are so great because you can typically take your baby. And that's something that you could do even if you're really, really stuck. Mm-hmm. And then I would say definitely if you're a first-time mom and you're breastfeeding, I didn't get to do this the first time around because I didn't think about it, because my mental state was really off. But when I had Jamie and when I was still trying to breastfeed, I reached out to La Leche League. La Leche League is wonderful. They have lots of resources. They've been around for ages. So there is La Leche League, but for me, there was actually an African American breastfeeding like group that I found probably on Facebook, because that was 2009, and they helped me so much postpartum wise. Like, and it wasn't even anything like crazy formal. We all got together in someone's house, someone hosted, we all sat and we had like water and tea and all that, and we just talked. We each got a chance to introduce ourselves and talk about what landed us there. And even though we did talk about breastfeeding, the stigmas, and like what we could do for ourselves, we started talking about like self-care too. And
yeah, inevitably.
that actually really helped me a lot. They don't even know how much it helped me, but it really did, because I didn't really have anybody to like talk
like,
to.
What, 25?
That was I believe I was 27 when I had Jamie.
Okay.
So, yeah, and just kind of reaching out to those groups, you never know what you might find. You might find your new best friend, like, or
it doesn't even. And there's not just ones for African American people, but
right.
anybody.
Well, both of them were open to all people.
Yeah.
It's just for me at that point in time, I needed that.
Yeah, exactly.
So there's lots of groups out there. Definitely get on Facebook. Find a group in your area, because sometimes moms band together and they like try to help each other out. Mm-hmm. So definitely do that if you're open to it. I would say, I know there's probably online like chats and stuff like that for mothers who don't want to actually like
go to
share
person,
or who aren't comfortable sharing who they are. There's things like that also. Yeah. So just, definitely reaching out is the hugest thing. Yeah. Reach out. Don't keep everything in. You will explode. Yeah. Just reach out for some help.
You gotta take care of yourself, because it's all gonna come up eventually. You gotta take care of yourself now.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Another question that I have is, because that answers one of them, where I was asking, how can new moms find help? So is there any other, like, little things that you could recommend, like, how they could find help?
Absolutely. So I actually did find a postpartum specific group. They're called Postpartum Support International. And they actually have a 1-800 number that you can call. It's 1-800-944-4773. And then they actually have a line you can text if you don't want to call or you're not able to call. And the text number is 503-894-9453. So those are two texting and calling groups that you can actually call to get help with postpartum. And it's interesting, because I was looking into this and I was kind of doing a little bit of research, and the first thing that popped up whenever I typed in postpartum depression was a hotline for substance abuse and then mental illness. And I'm like, that's terrible that's where you go immediately.
Yeah.
And it makes me really sad, because that means that this stigma goes way deeper than I thought. Yeah. And it's just like, damn, like this birth is trauma to the body. Yeah. It's beautiful. It's beautiful and it's natural.
But
and
how
grateful are we?
Now,
but it's trauma.
How it's being built right now and how it's being treated is extremely traumatic.
Absolutely.
Extremely.
Absolutely. So, so a really good way to look at it is this. If you got into a car accident, right, and you got tossed around the car, okay, you go to the hospital and you find out all these things that happened, all these issues, right? So you're in pain. Would you not cry out for help if you continued being in pain? So it's almost the exact same thing with postpartum. You had a child. You birthed another human into this world. You
grew it inside of your body, whether you had a C-section or you gave birth vaginally. You grew an entire being in your body. Your body expanded and made room physically for a whole, usually 7 to 8 to 9 pound being inside of your stomach.
Exactly.
That's real.
So
that's so real.
Oh my God.
Wow.
You crack me up.
I gotta take that.
It's just a lot. Wow. So that's trauma to your body. Even though your body's made for it, it's trauma. So if you come out of it and you're just expected to be all rainbows and butterflies, that's bullshit. That's ridiculous. No. And yes, everyone doesn't get postpartum depression, but different things happen, and postpartum is one of them.
Yeah.
And it's one that happens a lot.
And not everybody gets it.
Thank God.
Yeah.
Because I would never wish it upon anyone.
But it is very common.
It is very common, absolutely. And a lot of us really struggle with stepping into the reality that this is what's happening. What can I do to help myself? Because we don't help ourselves.
Yeah.
We're too busy helping everybody else. So,
before we have a few minutes left, since I had some questions that I wanted to ask you before we're done. One question I have is if you could tell yourself one thing.
Oh, wow.
When you were going through what you went through with Lilith and her father, what is just one little thing that you would have told yourself that maybe could have helped you in that process?
Speak. Speak. Because I remember that being one thing that I did not do. I literally gave all the control to him. Because I did love him. I loved him before we got pregnant. I loved him so much. And I loved him after. But he was trying to destroy himself and physically destroy me. And then the verbal abuse with, him and his mother. Like, just a lot. So having that, hit you as hard as it does, speak. That is just the biggest thing that I can say. Don't keep this to yourself.
Use your voice.
Open your mouth. Use your voice.
Use your voice.
Yes.
It is safe to use your voice.
Absolutely.
So that's beautiful. Thank you for sharing
You're
that. Because I
welcome.
feel like a lot of mothers probably needed to hear that one.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Another question I have is, what advice do you have for young mothers?
My biggest advice is to really just take care of yourself. You have to take care of yourself mentally, physically, and emotionally in order to be the mother that you want to be. And even if you're not perfect, and no one is. Perfection is an illusion. So even if you don't feel like you're doing everything exactly right, you're doing the best that you can, and that's all you can give. Just like in any situation, all you have is what you can offer. So try not to get yourself drowning in guilt over every little thing.
Yeah. And also that made me think of wherever you are, that's where you are.
Exactly.
So you're where you're supposed to be. Even if you're a young mother and this is maybe not what you had wanted for yourself, or it's hard and a lot has changed, you're exactly where you need to be. And just find how you can love that even deeper.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then what about, because I know that you've been a single mother as well.
Yes.
And I'm just curious about, any advice that you have for that, and just kind of building and bridging a conversation around being a single mother. I know we can definitely dive super deep into this in a whole nother episode, really.
We are going to talk about
we are going to
touch on that on another episode.
In this context of postpartum depression and becoming a single mother through that, what can you share? Just advice and just some of your experience around that.
Pay attention and be aware, because what ended up happening after I had Jamie is that I dove deep into depression and I started drinking a lot. When I look back on that, I was definitely an alcoholic. It was really bad. I was drinking every day, and then I got to the point where I was drinking by myself, and then I got to the point where I had to drink, and I had to drink to do certain things, and it just really got off the rails. And whenever I started doing yoga, that kind of helped me, because yoga makes you realize that you're worthy whether you want it to or not. It will make you realize it. It will open you up whether you're ready or not. And while my practice was me alone for the first 4 or 5 years in my room, I had a lot of revelations.
Yeah, and same here.
And whether I paid attention to them or not,
I think everybody should start their yoga journey just solo.
By themselves.
By yourself.
Absolutely. It's hard, though.
Yeah, it's hard.
Discipline.
Discipline, dude.
But I wanted to lose weight because I gained so much weight after I had both my children. That was a part of the depression. That was a part of the postpartum.
Yeah.
Is that I didn't value myself enough to take care of myself. Mm-hmm. So...
Then you're also feeling self-conscious about gaining so much weight and, being at a weight that you're not happy with.
Absolutely.
That builds more mental illness.
Yeah, so notice your habits as a single mom, and I'm not saying you have to be some little saint that doesn't drink or doesn't do whatever you want to do, you know, but I'm saying just be aware of what's happening within yourself and everything around you. And just kind of, so what happened was, as I continued doing yoga, I noticed my alcoholism was getting out of control because it was costing me so much money. And then I was like, okay, maybe I need to step away from this for a little while. So that's kind of what I did. I stopped drinking for like 2 years.
Nice.
And then I started losing weight. And then I kept doing yoga. And then I started, you know, it just kind of spiraled into being healthier and happier and just kind of taking care of myself more. And it was kind of awesome for my kids to be a witness to that. They weren't really a witness to the alcohol part because I usually drank while they were sleeping. But, I mean, I'm sure they witnessed the fatigue and how tired I was and how I wasn't able to be like perfectly like in tune with everything they were saying. I wasn't able to be in the moment. Even though I was still trying to meditate and do yoga, I was still drinking so heavily that I was like, of course nothing's gonna happen. Like, you're not gonna like lose weight if you're drinking ridiculous amounts of alcohol every day. So just notice your habits and pay attention to yourself. Be aware, so that you can continue to create your life as you want it.
100%.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I feel this is something that even as somebody that doesn't have a child yet, I mean, I definitely want to have a baby one day.
I can't wait.
This is really, really impactful and a very knowledgeable experience, and I can only imagine how many mothers out there need to hear this and are going to benefit from this, but also someday, even if you don't plan on having kids, like, it's important to know about. Everybody should be aware. Absolutely. Of the reality, you know?
Absolutely.
And I just really want to say thank you so much for...
You're welcome.
You know, like, you become such a close friend.
I know.
I am just so thankful to have you and to learn from you in a multitude of ways. And
I learned so much from you. You have no idea.
I know. Both of us exchanging an abundance of information.
Seriously.
Especially along the lines of self-discovery.
Yeah.
But thank you for trusting to, you know, share your story with me.
Absolutely.
And
thanks for having
look
me.
in my eyes as you're sharing it. This is really, really beautiful. Thank you so much
for
trusting me and, you know, allowing this platform of wild medicine that I'm creating to be somewhere that you feel safe to share this. So thank you, sister.
You're welcome. Yay. Oh,
yay. Well, I think that's good for today.
Absolutely.
And we'll be on talking again about this in a future episode.
Absolutely.
What are we going to dive deeper a little bit into the next episode?
I think next what we'll do is we'll talk about mom guilt. Because I feel like that comes right after postpartum depression if you get it. Like, the mom guilt, and that continues all throughout our lives in different ways. So I'm super excited to talk about mom guilt next, because it's something that I'm still continuing to work through, but because I love myself and I want to take care of myself and I want to be the best mommy that I can possibly be, I'm starting to learn to recognize when it pops up and let it go. So mom guilt's next for sure.
Hell yeah. Well, definitely stay tuned, guys. Like, this is going to go super deep, and we're going to do multiple episodes on this because it needs to be talked about.
Absolutely. Get rid of that stigma shit.
Thank you so much for listening, and if you enjoyed this episode, there's a few ways that you can help us out and contribute. Definitely heading over to iTunes.com and checking out our podcast, subscribing, and also giving a review. Let us know what you're enjoying, what you're thinking, even areas where you think that we could do better. Whatever you want to say, just putting it out there and giving us a few stars. It helps out so much. It not only helps other people find this podcast, but it also helps me get on more guests so that we can continue to spread more wild medicine and in-depth information on topics that need to be talked about right now. It is the perfect timing to express and talk about these subjects. So doing a review really helps me out. You can also head over to earthly.com and reach out to me. I do readings, I do healings, and I make spirit gear. So definitely reach out to me on there. And Inga, where can people find you?
So on Instagram, I am yoga.goddess420. And on Facebook, you can look up Inga Raquel Seals and Inga the Yoga Goddess. I actually have it to where you can look up Inga the Yoga Goddess on Instagram or Facebook, and you should be able to very easily find me.
Yes.
And like I said, I'll be around. If you ever need to talk, hit me up, because I'm down to listen. I'm down to be a sounding board.
Yeah, and Inga is a woman that I go to when I need some energetical and emotional pick-me-ups, whether that's through yoga, crystals, like just friendship and talking, good times, and now I guess mama advice. So she's a well-rounded woman that you can reach out to at any time. So much love. Thank you so much for listening, and remember to reach out and subscribe. Yay. Blessings on blessings on blessings.
Thank you.